All right, thanks everybody for joining us for our June 28th Committee of the Whole for the City of Courtenay. It's about 4 p.m. on Monday. And I just want to start by respectfully acknowledging that the land in which we gather is on the unceded traditional territory of the CoW First Nation. And I really want to thank them for welcoming us here. And due to the COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with the Ministerial Order M192/2020 and the class order mass gatherings, council meetings will be conducted virtually and live streamed on the City of Courtenay's YouTube channel. And I think just given the amount of heat that we've had over the last few days, I do just want to again make sure everybody's aware to keep hydrated, stay cool as much as possible. And I just want to give a bit of a shout out to the municipalities in the Comox Valley, Comox, Courtenay, and Cumberland that have popped up some cooling stations. The volunteers that have gone around handing out water, hats, and sunscreen, absolutely critical. And I don't think we're through the heat wave just yet, but just really want to acknowledge those that have stepped up to make that happen. So, and with that, we'll go into staff presentations, and we have the consideration of the 2020 annual municipal report.
Move receipt of the report.
Second.
Excellent, thanks for that. And I'll pass it over to CAO Jeff Garber.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We're very pleased to have in front of you our 2020 annual report. It's a very comprehensive document. It's designed to provide an overview of our activities and do required financial reporting on behalf of the municipality. And it really shows the incredible innovation and support that council gave to our staff and our staff provided to the community over this unprecedented time. We understand really that COVID-19 affected every operation and service delivered by the municipality, as well as affected all of our residents and taxpayers. I'm very proud of the role that staff played in delivering these services and working with council to support really effective decision-making during this time. We mobilized very effectively. We did a bunch of innovation that we will definitely incorporate and carry forward in our practice for the community. So we have in front of you the annual report starting on page 3 of the agenda, and it's for council's receipt. I'm available for any questions.
Excellent. And any questions? Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Jeff. It is a beautiful document, and since I first started reading these, I've often had a question in my mind, which is how much these get outside the world of City Hall and local government people, because I think it's a beautiful communication document and a lot of care was put into that. I'm wondering, we kind of discussed this a bit last week in strategic planning, whether maybe making the annual reports something that just meets the reporting requirements of section 98 and 99 of the community charter. And then if we could try to find a more accessible way of communicating out to the general public the things that we've been doing, because I don't know this for sure, but I would imagine very few members of the general public actually have the opportunity to run across this. So is that something that do most communities produce a report similar to this, Jeff, or do you get some which are just fulfilling the statutory requirements with the numbers and then doing separate communication to kind of get out their message of what they've done in the year?
Through the mayor to Councillor Cole Hamilton, I appreciate the question. There is a variety of things, and typically the communication, we meet the statutory obligations. That's what governments must do. And typically municipalities such as yourselves, we combine it together with a very fulsome document that covers where we are. And then we do use it as a communication tool to get out to the public. There are options to meet the statutory requirements and then convert it into a communication outreach tool specifically. And we are certainly hearing from council on that, and we'll look at a communication strategy in the big picture when we go forward.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. And just to reiterate what you were saying, it's remarkable what was done in the city under unbelievably challenging circumstances. So I just want to make sure I'm not moving on before acknowledging that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton. And I don't have the actual order, so I'm writing it down as I'm seeing these go up. So Councillor Hillian, I had you next.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes. And This is the mic for, I believe, for the thing, but yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's a little quiet.
It normally turns green, but I'll go ahead and speak. And I just wanted to acknowledge all the work of city staff as reflected in the report and in the preparation of the report itself. One of the things that I wondered about is not sure if the report reflects the work conducted through the regional district. The city basically pays 60% of the cost of, and that city representatives have a significant role in. So I wondered if in future, and certainly when the mayor reports on the accomplishments of council and staff, whether it's worth including some of those significant larger projects that we are engaged in through the regional district, many of which parallel our efforts here, but don't necessarily get credit to input from the city. So I wanted to make that suggestion. Otherwise, I really appreciate the report. I know that we have questions about its distribution relative to the amount of work that staff put into it. But I believe it's been useful in the past in terms of organizations that have made use of it. I have to say I love the pictures. They reflect some of the most positive aspects of the city and the work that our people do. And so I'm certainly open to dialogue about it. But in the meantime, it's a worthy document celebrating the accomplishments of our city in an incredibly difficult year. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hilling, for acknowledging that. Did you want to respond, CAO, or should I move on? You're good? Okay. Next we had Councillor Theos.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Yeah, in the past, as a reporting out tool, I had seen this report going out in the newspapers as part of an insert going door, basically house to household. So I don't know if this year we need to do that, or maybe find a way of doing it through social media and being able to save on the costs in the paper and whatnot. But finding a way to be able to get this out to the public so they can have a good look at it. A few points that I wanted to raise and ask about is one of the areas that was mentioned here that people have been asking me about is in regards to when can people start coming into City Hall again and basically moving forward with business as it was in the past to some degree. That's one of the questions, and maybe. Thank you.
Through the mayor to Councillor Theos, we'll have a report to council on July 5th outlining our gradual reopening plan. I would say that on the information side, we've been able to develop a really effective tool to get information to people. We have maintained our contacts and we do have meetings with people. They don't typically happen in this location as it stands now, but we're in the process of moving back to what we call maybe the new normal as to how we're going to work with the public. We do have protective screens in place, et cetera, for that. So in the first week of July, we'll have a report, or sorry, July 5th, we'll have a report on our operations there.
Appreciate it. That's the other points I was wanting to raise is there was a section there as in terms of the building development and the business.
Sorry about that. I was just seeing if I could adjust this, but apparently I can't. So I'm going to try that again.
Yeah, as in terms of the building and the business licensing, if I may ask, I noticed that there was almost 2,250 business licenses in 2019, and 2020 had just about a 500 drop in business licenses to just over 1,750. So I was wondering, in regards to what was the catalyst to that drop, obviously COVID, but I would assume we didn't have 500 less businesses.
Well, through the mayor to Councillor Theos, I guess I would respond. Typically, we have seen some businesses change their operations. Mr. Buck is on the call today, and he might be able to provide some additional information there. We haven't gone and specifically addressed those questions, but there's no doubt that our local economy was impacted through COVID, and we were very cognizant of that. Council made some careful choices about how they were going to be dealing with the public's money. And I'll leave it at that. Sure, Mr. Buck can provide any additional information.
Thanks very much through the mayor to council. Unfortunately, the audio is not great, and I wasn't able to pick up the vast majority of what was said there.
Sorry, Mr. Buck, I was asking in regards to business licenses and that there was almost a 500 drop, which was over 20% drop in the amount of business licenses from 2019 to 2020. And I was interested in knowing what was the driving force behind it. Was it businesses just not renewing their licensing, or was there amalgamation of licensing, or maybe some other factors involved, or just businesses closing?
Yeah, to be honest, I think it's probably a combination of all of those. I know we did have some that early on with COVID struggled to keep their doors open. So some people didn't renew their licenses last year. We'd have to dive into those numbers to see if that was just a one-off or whether that's a continuing trend of businesses, but don't have the specific details at this time.
Okay, well, thanks for keeping an eye on that.
Yeah.
Through the mayor to council, I would clarify, we have responded, and we're working very closely with the business improvement area as well as with the Chamber of Commerce, and we've been providing information on new business starts to them directly to foster and support their membership. So we really recognize that we have some great partnerships there in support of the local business community, and so kind of as we emerge from these issues in COVID, we're going to do our very best to make sure that businesses are connected with their representative support organization. So we're hoping that will make a difference as well.
Well, thank you very kindly, CEO, and I can come back to further question after. So.
All right, thanks, Councillor Theos. Appreciate that. Councillor Moore.
Great, thanks, Mayor. This isn't really working, I guess. I'm just talking loud.
This is the microphone you have to speak into,
Okay.
so if you look this way and use your outside voice.
Okay, great. Yeah, I would agree with Councillor Paul Hamilton around really great looking report. Love the photos. And I'm thinking that it may be helpful to have highlighting some of the components of the report, like the development piece, or any of it's sort of in our communications, maybe highlighting certain sections of the report might be helpful on social media or wherever. And I just also thought it would be helpful in future to some of the things that we're trying to promote is being accessible to everybody who lives here and to represent everyone who lives here. And so maybe having more representation of under the piece on under it, we could have had some photos with some of our Indigenous peoples. And also I'm thinking even just reflecting some of the diversity of the community in some of the photos rather than all kind of the same. But I think it's a great looking report for sure. I was just scrolling through to see if there was anything else, but I think those one pagers could be really helpful as well in the communication out to the public. Thanks.
So thanks, Councillor Moore, appreciate that. And any further questions or comments? Councillor Hilling.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm glad Councillor Fias picked up on the decline in business licenses. I had meant to mention that. And just to add to what staff have shared, I know business owners who were considering retiring or winding down their business, and who, when we got into the pandemic restrictions, just decided that that was the time to do that. I think there were all sorts of individual circumstances. There were obviously some people whose businesses didn't make it through. And of course, when we talk about business licenses, we're not just talking about storefronts, we're talking about people who operate their homes and people who run out of the back of their truck and all sorts of things. So there's probably, as I say, a million stories in the native city, and this is one of them. But I think it's certainly something we want to keep an eye on. But my guess is that a lot of that was circumstances combining with the pandemic to make those decisions.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Haley. And it is something that I've been speaking with the Chamber and Economic Development from the different municipalities as well. We had the Economic Recovery Task Force that was struck last year. And hopefully we'll actually be meeting again soon. Again, when we met last year, there was sort of a feeling that we might be through this by January, but obviously the timelines have shifted quite significantly. But as Councillor Haley points out, it certainly became a point in time where I know a few friends of mine that own their own businesses at home, which would have a business license but not necessarily a location. They got offered jobs, weirdly enough, that paid far more than it was worth to actually keep their own business going. And I think that's one of the things that from the economic side, just looking at the jobs themselves and the pay scale, which seems to have there's a lot of competition right now. And it's probably one of the biggest risks that I see to businesses right now, and what I hear back from the Chamber and other organizations, is just the ability for people to find staff. And I think actually you're on the other side of that equation right now. So yeah,
Exactly.
but anyways, I do appreciate that question. And but just want to thank staff. And again, I think one of the things that happened when the pandemic started, I mean, we were actually, I think, having council meetings every week on top of other meetings and regional meetings. And it was certainly a trying time, but I just, again, want to thank staff for a great report. And with that, all those in favor. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, my light is hard to see from your angle.
Yeah.
Thanks for the points from yourself and Councillor Haley, and excellent points. Very appreciated in regards to the business licensing and the challenges some of the business people are facing. But the other point I wanted to make was a point now with tax season upon us, something that we've all been dealing with in terms of questions, which is the confusion of the fact that we had a tax increase of just under 2%, but some businesses were looking at their tax increases over the previous year, and there was some confusion over those numbers. Part of the package here included the tax season, and the fact that the school district costs last year were forgiven by the province, and that was to a tune of about 75% of those costs, and we just collected on behalf of the province. We have no control over that element of our tax receipt. And this year, that has changed from the provincial government, and that was, I guess, a one-year one-off. And this year, that 75% that was forgiven last year by the province is now being collected again. So business taxes are basically going up as a result of that, but not as a result of an action that we've taken at the City Council.
That's an excellent point, Councillor Theos. I do appreciate you bringing that up, and it is probably one of the biggest questions we get from business owners right now, or commercial building owners, is why their taxes have gone up this year when our actual tax increase was pretty minimal. And yeah, that school tax was a pretty big hit, I think. And when you're comparing year over year, then that's exactly what it's going to look like. And of course, we're technically the messenger in this case. But I do want to give again kudos out to staff for really doing their best to keep the taxes in check as much as possible. And also understand that the provincial government still has to provide its services and collect its taxes. But I think at this point, I have given folks that have been frustrated with their taxes the opportunity to speak with myself, and I'm sure other councillors have spoken with people on a regular basis. So hopefully that message is getting out there, but really appreciate you bringing it up.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I see Councillor Moore.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
nope.
Turned off.
My apologies.
Do we need to approve the report rather than just receive it?
We have to
CEO,
consider it, it says.
Yeah, it's for receipt. It's an obligation to publish that information. Motion to receive.
and I think we have that. Anybody opposed? I see nobody opposed, so therefore it passes unanimously. Thanks for that great conversation. And next we'll move on to the RCMP policing expenditure for 2022-2023.
Yeah, I'll move that council provide approval in principle for an expenditure cap of $6,831,280 for the 2022-23 municipal policing contract, of which Courtney is responsible for 90%.
Second.
All right, and that's on the table. I'll pass it over to CEO Jeff Garber.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Ms. Nelson is available for questions, and she might give a short overview.
You think she's gonna answer questions, is she? Or is she gonna?
Maybe not.
It looks like she's not hearing it.
Through the
I can hear you. Would you like me to provide a quick overview of the report?
Yes, please. That would be fantastic.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So the purpose of this report is for Council to consider and provide approval in principle to the City of Courtenay RCMP Municipal Policing Expenditure Cap for 2022-2023 contract year. This is an annual requirement in compliance with the terms of the Municipal Policing Agreement, and you are required to provide approval in principle by June 30th this year in order to secure the federal component of the contract. The multi-year detailed financial plan, along with all the supporting documents, is attached to the report. And there are a few cost drivers feeding into the increase in 2022 around salary increases and increases to machinery and equipment costs. So just so council is aware, we have reviewed this, and the estimated expenditure cap is consistent with what we incorporated last year in your 2021 to 2025 financial plan. So it's in line with what we had in 2022 and out. And so within our budget, we do budget for the 2-member vacancy, and that is consistent in ours. To note, at this stage, you are just providing approval in principle, and you do have another opportunity before providing final approval, which is due in April of 2022. So you'll have an opportunity to review this in further detail through the budget process. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Ms. Nelson, for the report. And with that, I'll pass it over to Councillor Helene.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to staff for this annual exercise in agony and confusion. I guess what I'd like is to get some clarification on the fact that I understand the town of Comox passed the 90% or the threshold of population this year that will require them to pay 90%. I don't know if that kicks in this year or next. But I was always under the impression that when Comox started paying 90%, that would somehow make a difference to our policing costs. And apparently that's not the case. It just means that they pay more of their full amount, and the province pays less. So could you please clarify that? And I will eat humble pie based on my previous belief that we were eventually going to benefit by convincing a few more people to move to Comox.
Through the mayor and council, you are correct. I happened to raise that question with Inspector Curvers. We had a very good interview when I came on as CAO, and he did confirm that their increase in cost does not reduce our cost to provide policing services.
And it also doesn't necessarily augment policing services, so the complement will likely remain the same.
It's strictly a cost share as opposed to a resource question.
Yeah. And I just want to point out that for numerous years, we trekked to the Union of BC Municipalities Conference and spoke to representatives of the Ministry of Finance, talking about the fact that we felt policing costs were allocated inequitably and that they should be dealt with as any other public service. But we haven't received any Troy on that one. So I think it is significant for residents to note that it is a huge amount of our tax bill. The other point I wanted to make is that given the events in the world of the past year or so, there has been a lot of attention on the role of the police. We did have, I believe, maybe one or two messages from people who thought we should be voting to defund the police. I offered to meet with an individual who wrote in that regard and never heard anything back. So I think that most of our citizens value the role of the police. I know that we do as a council. And while we certainly acknowledge the travesties of the past and the injustices that are perpetrated at times, we work hand in hand with our police force to serve the community and to address those issues and to provide better service in the future. So just wanted to make that point. Mr. Mayor, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Healy. And yeah, and you know, meeting with the Public Safety and Solicitor General for many years to really dig into how that cost benefit. We've even had a motion from this council go to UBCM to look at rejigging those cost sharing, because it is quite onerous, and there can be unforeseen expenses as well. If there's a homicide, just the cost of investigating the homicide could cost $1 million, and so that would be basically an unfunded unknown expense that would just have to be paid for by the municipality. So I think there are certainly ongoing challenges, but now I think we have CoMox to possibly help us out with our song that we're trying to sing to the province to reduce those costs. Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Great, thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you for the report, Jennifer. I just wanted to ask just about the vacancy pattern, and I see that we're doing 2 members is what we're factoring in, and you mentioned that over the last few years it's been 4 to 5 members, but you expect to see that reduce in the future. I'm just curious as to what the patterns of vacancies are that make us think that it's probably likely to go back to 2.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. We do keep a close eye on the vacancy pattern. We had some discussions with the inspector last year and we reduced that gap. As we were watching 2020, that vacancy was starting to shrink. So near the end of the year, we were coming in at almost just about 3 members of a vacancy. So getting closer to that 2. We do have the first quarter for 2021, and it was about a 4 member. So it is starting to reduce that amount, and we did incorporate the 2 member vacancy. So we had a bit of buffer room in our 2021 financial plan.
All right, thanks for clarifying that.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton, and Councillor Theos.
Thank you. Through to
And don't forget, this is the mic here.
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I keep thinking about it. Through to Director Nelson. This year there was some questions in regards to some of the RCMP detachments. Some including one of the larger RCMP detachments in Surrey, possibly going to municipal policing, and the impacts from that could have ripple effects on the RCMP potential costs and services for other communities. Do you know, Director Nelson, if there are going to be any direct impacts on us if some of these larger municipalities switch from RCMP to municipal policing, whether they're financial or service impacts that are going to be impacting us?
So I'm not aware of any specific impacts related to that situation. I think where we might see is if there were existing RCMP members redeployed to other locations. So, you know, if they've got additional FTEs that are then moved out to jurisdictions with the RCMP. So you may see the vacancies filled, but that would be the only comment I could make on that. And I think maybe our CAO has more to add.
Thank you.
Through the mayor and Councillor Theos, in some initial discussions that we've heard that there is, you know, certainly competition for police officers, and you know, that is an integration of RCMP across the country. But at this point, we don't really have anything specifically to highlight as it would relate to our own jurisdiction or within our area that policing services are provided. But it's certainly an item that is being raised, and the work of police officers is extremely challenging, and recruitment of them is also quite challenging. They're also, you know, the growth and changes that they're going to be making in all areas of policing also add some, you know, some challenges to them that they need to respond to as well. So if and when there is information available, we certainly brief council, and it's a matter that we're looking at.
Thank you very much, CEO. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And Councilor Moore.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to bring up, just in relation to what Councillor Hillian was talking about with the movement, talking about defunding the police, and there's a bunch of different reasons for that, which he touched on. But I think one of the things that we're hearing a lot from the public is having more supports for people who are struggling with mental health and addiction on the street. And I know Councillor Hamilton and I were at a substance use strategy committee meeting today, where several of the folks on that committee are looking at the CoW model, which stands for crisis assistance helping out on the streets. And they're using that model in other communities, and it's not to replace the police. They actually work hand in hand with the police and hopefully free up the police to do other, you know, tasks so that they're not being taken away for some of those things that this team could assist with. So I just want to put that out there, that those kinds of ideas are probably going to come forward because they are considered to be pretty vital to actually supporting the police and the work that they do. Because those folks would be called instead of the police, and certainly be an assessment where they would be coming out to the call instead. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there, that is, it's not necessarily taking funding away from the police. In some cases it may be reallocating, but the hope is that some of these teams would actually be able to assist in some of those areas so that the police could be out there attending to things that were more serious in nature, more criminal in nature. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Councillor Moore. And I do appreciate that. And with our meeting with Minister Eby, that our CAO, Jeff Garbutt, and Councillor Hillian and I attended, that was one of the key components from a housing perspective. And, you know, them now talking seriously about what they talk about as complex care or super care, basically, for people that really are suffering from mental health and addictions. Because I think that's part of it, is having those resources and capacity to do it as well. But really, really happy. It sounds like there's some alignment happening, right from the people on the front lines up to the provincial government. So any further questions or comments regarding this? I don't see anything else. Anybody opposed to approval? Seeing none, it passes unanimously. Excellent. Next, we have the annual development cost charges DCC report. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move that based on the June 28th, 2021 staff report, 2020 annual development cost charges DCC report, council approve option 1 and approve the City of Courtenay 2020 annual DCC report.
Second.
Excellent. Moved and seconded. I'll pass it over to CEO Jeff Garber.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Ms. Nelson has a quick overview of this discussion.
Thank you. I'm just going to turn this over to our Manager of Finance, Renata Vika. She's going to summarize the report for you.
Thank you. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council. First, I would like to thank Krista McClintock, our accountant, for preparing this report. And the report we are presenting today is the 2020 Development Cost Charges DCC report. This is a statutory report that needs to be approved by Council by June 30th. And once this report is approved, we'll post it on our website. And just to note, the content of this report you have previously seen and approved in the 2020 audited financial statements within the 2020 SOFI report, and as well as tonight in the 2020 annual report. With that, I'll leave it open to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Excellent. That was a great report. It may have been so good. I'm not sure if there are any questions or comments, but if I don't see any, Councillor Theos.
Hi, thank you so much.
And don't forget the microphones over here.
Okay.
I do.
Yeah, it was, thanks for keeping it brief, but my question's in regards to the communication, and it might be in the report, and I may not have seen it, but can you give me an idea of the communication with the affected groups in this regard, the development community, on bringing these charges forward, and how that communication occurred? Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
I think I will have to defer this question to Ian Buck, the Director of Development Services.
Thank you. Very kindly.
Thanks very much. So just to clarify, these aren't new charges. This is the status of the statutory reserves and what the balances are. So it doesn't have any direct impact on the development sector other than informing them if there's interest in what those balances are today.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's what I needed to know. All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks very much. And with that, we have the motion on the floor. So I don't see any further questions or comments. Anybody opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. All right. And then we have external reports. We have a letter from Comox First Nation.
Move receipt.
There's a motion.
Oh, thank you for noting that. Yeah, sorry.
Councillor Paul Hamilton.
I'd like to move the council direct staff to work with local municipalities and Comox First Nation KFN to discuss the process and steps required to implement the KFN cultural and heritage policy.
Thanks so much. And to our CEO, Jeff Garber.
Thank you. Thank you through the mayor to council. And I really think this is a great opportunity to look at understanding how we can utilize this process with Comox First Nation to pre-plan and address archaeological issues, both known and unknown. And really the unknown is when you have very significant issues. And this process and permitting would be focused primarily on local government activities. At this time, we do work with and advise private developers that they should consider these ideas, because it really is good practice and it helps guard against some really challenging things that may happen. And there is background information and there's good practice out there to follow. I think it's really important that we all collectively follow a similar procedure, and that at the same time, it's also clear and operationalized for implementation. We've been working, the 4 CAOs in the Valley have discussed with Mr. Todd Boychuk, who's the external representative of Comox First Nation on these matters, and we're really looking forward to developing an effective and efficient process together.
Thanks very much, Mr. Robert. I appreciate that. And we have Councillor Frisch. Sorry, I couldn't see the link, so I'm
It's
jumping.
me, Bob.
Nothing's labeled anymore, so if I can't see your mic, then it's out of sight. Out of
Yeah,
mind.
you know, just, I mean, a question that might not have an answer yet, but I would assume we get a report back at some point in the future, but this might take some time. I don't know if we have any idea of how long that would take, or is it, maybe it's an ongoing thing as well. Maybe it's started out taking 6 months or a year, but takes some refinement over the years.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Frisch, that's a great question. The realizing how best to do this will both, you know, incorporate best practice and evolve. So I would say that as we work through this, we'll get, you know, and be developed further. But it'd probably be at least in the, you know, late fall. Now, my understanding is that the CRD has been exploring some of this, kind of operationalizing this through the sewer conveyance project, and so we certainly would not want to reinvent the wheel here, but there's a number of people around the table that have worked through these processes, and we want to incorporate the practice that works for all, you know, the most efficient and appropriate practice for all.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. And Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify with staff that whether or not we have a role to play with the development community through our approvals process, building permits and the like, of both educating and or advising in relation to a policy like this. How does a private developer become aware of this, and how are they helped to maintain compliance with such a policy?
I'll start, and Mr. Buck can weigh in if I don't get to completion. We raise this through known archaeological areas for private developers. We provide them with information both on the Provincial Heritage Conservation Act process as well as the cultural heritage permit process that Comox First Nation has done. In terms of holding them to account for their activities, there's provincial legislation that does that. Unfortunately, it is reactive. And so that's why developers being aware of this and incorporating good practice, including pre-digging, et cetera, and consulting with Comox First Nation in advance is good practice. And we've already started this process, and we'll be doing it with the Sandpiper water extension. Other local governments have done it as well. The Sandpiper project predated the CHP, but we're working towards that on that point. And we will share practice with private developers.
Thanks very much. You certainly will be aware that there is a history of archaeological sites being both damaged and ignored in the development process. So I think as much as we can bring our own practices in line with this and support the development community to do likewise, we'll be advancing the reconciliation work that we want to do and to honor Comox First Nation and their history. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. Great points. And Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. A question about the, with this motion, which is process and steps for implementation, is the idea that Courtney would join with BRD and Comox and Cumberland and sort of have a working group to sort of strategize how to best put this into play?
Yes. Through the mayor to Councilor Moore, correct.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess, you know, obviously everyone knows my son is an archaeologist, and he shares quite frequently that sites that you wouldn't even necessarily know have remains. Like there are so many remains that are found in places you wouldn't even expect, and the places that where you would expect, there's far more remains found than even suspected. So I think particularly at this time when people are really grieving around unmarked graves, we have to really take this seriously and make sure that we're super cautious, and I think, try to really get the message through to the development community, to those who may not have as much information on what a big deal this is. I think it's crucial because it's a really difficult time right now, and we have to be careful. So thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moran. And extend our thanks to your son, who does an amazing job and has really helped, I think, all the elected officials in the Comox Valley understand the significance of these archaeological sites. And with that, I'll poll council. Actually, I'll have you raise your hands for this one. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that is unanimous. Thanks very much. That brings us to resolutions of council. I do have a resolution here. And actually, I had a question on whether or not, because as I'm chairing the meeting, that may pose a problem with me actually moving this forward.
I'm happy to move it for you if you want.
That'd be fantastic. Thanks, Councilor Frisch.
Okay, well, it's short and brief as usual. Whereas the Council of the City of Courtenay supports the March 9th, 2021 Regional District of Nanaimo Resolution, full service hospital for Central and North Island at Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. Therefore, be it resolved that Council directs staff to write a letter to the Honorable John Horgan, Premier, the Honorable Adrian Dix, Minister of Health, and the Honorable Selena Robinson, Minister of Finance, requesting the province of BC commit to a plan and timeline of 5 to 8 years for a new patient tower and diagnostic treatment center, including cardiac services and cardiac cath lab, and a new full-service cancer center at Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. And that a meeting be requested with the Honorable Adrian Dix, Minister of Health, the Honorable Josie Osborne, Minister of Municipal Affairs, to speak to the necessity of a full-service hospital at the Nanaimo Regional General Hospital to better serve the medical needs of Central and North Island communities, and that the letter be copied to the Comox Strathcona Regional District Board.
Second.
Excellent. Thanks for that. If you don't mind, I'll just speak to it for a moment. So this came up just in conversations with other mayors on the North Island here around the need for this and the fact that there are a couple of issues. One, there isn't a committed timeline for it just yet. And secondly, that there may be a financial implication, which is one of the reasons why I think it's imperative that we do copy this to the Regional Hospital District Board. To make sure that the local leaders have the ability to have a seat at the table, so to speak, to speak about not just about the services, but how it's going to be financed. That's it. Any questions or comments? Councillor Hilling.
Thanks, Mayor. I have to confess, I struggle a little bit with this motion because the first clause says that we support the resolution for a full service hospital. And as far as I know, we've never actually discussed that at this table.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a good idea, and my understanding from speaking to representatives of Island Health is that it is very high on their priority list, then fair enough. I suppose writing a letter to the ministers involved, asking them to commit makes sense, but I'm not sure why we would actually be carrying that out by asking for meetings with ministers to talk about it. It's a Nanaimo project, and maybe they should meet with the ministers involved. But the other points, I shared information with council at the end of last week, noting that there's a story in the Nanaimo News Bulletin indicating that the Regional District of Nanaimo may ask neighboring districts to help cover some of the costs of a project of this nature, while at the same time, the Nanaimo Regional Hospital District currently taxes at $16 per 100,000 of assessed value, which is significantly below what we do in the Comox Strathcona at 54 per 100,000. So the point that I would make is that one of the ways that we were able to get 2 new hospitals in this area was to in fact raise a significant amount so that we were going to be able to, through both reserves and borrowing, meet the 40% contribution that the province requests when building a new hospital. If the regional district of Nanaimo or the Nanaimo Hospital District isn't willing to up their taxes so that they can in fact get closer to that point, I'm not sure why we would be lobbying on their behalf at this stage for the province to put additional resources forward. And so it strikes me that this resolution may be premature and that it might be more to the point to lobby that regional district and regional hospital district to sort out their own process before we actively lobby for that resource. Now, I appreciate you saying that, but obviously health services are important to our population, and having the types of services that are speculated about here closer at hand will provide good service to our community. But I think we need to balance that with what a sensible process would look like and step by step. So it just strikes me as premature that we would be lobbying the province on behalf of Nanaimo when they haven't got their own tax system sorted out.
Excellent point. Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And you know, this motion did come as a result of a impromptu meet the mayor with some chief medical officers from a couple of the areas, and that's, you know, their concern was that this has been identified as a priority, but it has been for quite some time, and it still hasn't moved forward. And so they're just from a health and safety perspective, and that's where maybe it coming from our health board, that it, you know, that is this something that is supported or maybe be discussed at the Comox Strathcona Health Hospital Board. That might be a more appropriate place for the conversation to happen. Yeah, that's sort of the genesis of this. So. And Councillor McCall.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I tend to agree with a lot of the comments that Councillor Hillian's made. Until seeing your notice motion last week, I wasn't even aware that this was something that they were working towards or planning for in the Nanaimo region. And we just came through some strategic planning at the hospital board and spent some time thinking about what's next for our service, and this wasn't even something that was raised through VHA. So yeah, I mean, and from what you've said, I can certainly see the logic, but it also feels a bit premature to write a letter about something that I have basically no understanding of, and then the highlighting that it's not even something that's being financially planned for by their own hospital board or discussed with other hospital boards. If that's the method for that expansion is looking at the North and Central Island, and all those regional districts will fine. But it seems to me that conversation should happen first before we're lobbying and asking for meetings. So yeah, I tend to see it in a similar light as Councillor Hillian at this point. Not a no, but maybe a later.
Yeah. And absolutely, I totally appreciate that. And again, I may sometimes be a bit of a keener. So when in brainstorming with the folks, you know, I sort of, you know, they said, well, they've asked for it to be a priority. And I said, well, have you asked for follow-up meetings? And they said no. And I was like, well, to me, that's kind of the obvious thing to do. And they actually, you know, the response I got from them is, yeah, that'd be a great idea, but they kind of sent off their letters and requests already. But I fully appreciate the comments. And Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think that probably, well, I definitely have similar feelings, and I guess part of what, at this point, I don't know enough about the circumstances and why it is that it's taken so long. It could be perhaps because they don't have the resources required, the 40% that the province would be, but I'm more leaning towards later, because I just feel at this point that I don't have an adequate understanding of what the barriers are why the province is resisting. There may be reasons that we, at this point, that they don't understand, having not discussed it before. So, yeah, would not quote Councillor McCollum as saying not a no, but probably later at this point.
No, fair enough. And having spent a few hours talking to various folks, I feel that I've been given some background on it. And I think really where the urgency came from is the fact that this was supposed to be something that happened years ago. And for people that do have a cardiac event here in the Comox Valley, if we're just looking at Courtenay residents alone, the treatment that they get here is significantly subpart of what they would get in Victoria. And in fact, the true treatment is only in Victoria, so they can do sort of minor things that would be kind of considered old school here. But when it comes to current treatments, the only way to do that is to get to Victoria as quick as possible. And I think that's where the urgency comes from, and the fact that this was highlighted as a priority quite a few years ago. It's just, it seems to have been stuck somewhere again in the sausage maker of Island Health, I think. Councillor Frisch.
Thanks so much, Mayor. I wonder if it would be palatable to simply defer this until you might be comfortable bringing it back with some more information, so that council just better understands the situation at hand and can, be fully informed to make such a decision. And if you're comfortable with that, I would make that motion.
Yeah, and one of the conversations I've had, and maybe this will play into it, is that having the folks that I've spoken to actually be a delegation.
Yeah.
And it probably may be more valuable for them to be a delegation at the hospital board than even here. So that, not to defer things, but like I said, this seemed like something urgent and nobody else was sort of talking about it, which is why I sort of brought it forward. But that may be the better place for it to be, which, not to kick the ball down the road, but
yeah.
And Councillor Hillian had a comment as well, so maybe we'll come back.
If that's necessary, we'll come back.
Councillor Hillian.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Well, not to minimize the situation, but when you're asking the government to commit to a timeline of 5 to 8 years, that's hardly urgent. But I wonder if it might be make more sense to simply defeat this motion and replace it with the council in writing or you on behalf of the city, requesting that the regional district of Nanaimo present to the hospital board for Comox Strathcona on the rationale for this project and any support that they're looking for. Because I think that would be a place to for the dialogue around if they are in fact looking at other hospital districts to potentially contribute. That's something that we would want to know about, because that's something that would set a very challenging precedent. If every center that has a major hospital that gets citizens from other parts of the province coming decides that they're going to ask for money from those other hospital districts, I think our taxpayers might have something to say about that. But it does seem to me that if they seriously want other regions to lobby on their behalf or to support them in this regard, that making that presentation to the hospital board would make sense.
Fair enough. I don't see any further questions or comments, so maybe I'll ask all those in favor. I see none. All those against or opposed? All right, and I'm voting against my own motion, so it's all good.
We're still unanimous.
No hard feelings.
We're still unanimous.
And Councillor Frisch, did you, or Councillor Hillian?
I'll move that council write to the regional district of Nanaimo regarding their full service hospital resolution, requesting that they consider presenting to the Comox Strathcona Hospital Board in relation to that proposed project.
Second.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Any questions or comments regarding that? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? And we might even know a guy who knows a guy, so to speak. But yeah, sorry. Thanks for the discussion. I do know that this kind of came out of left field here, so I appreciate the conversation. Next, we have unfinished business, Comox Valley Transit Infrastructure Study. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, I'll move that council refer the materials presented regarding the Comox Valley Transit Infrastructure Study to staff for a report back to council at a future meeting date.
Second.
And if I could just quickly ask a question, did staff feel that there was a timeline associated with this that we need to meet, or is it fairly relaxed over there at the RD?
Through the mayor to Councillor Frisch, we'll reach out to CVRD staff to quantify when, because I did happen to sit in the CVRD board's deliberation relative to this, and I thought it wasn't totally clear that the board had specifically endorsed the key recommendations. I think they wanted to get some feedback on those recommendations. We need to get some clarification from CVRD staff, particularly around some of the infrastructure requirements that are required in order to support some of those changes and how that they can be addressed on this signalization that Councillor Cole Hamilton had identified, as well as some of the siting requirements for the preferred options on the transit exchanges. And I also think that there needs to be a discussion of how development along the routes in and around those areas may help support the implementation of some of those items as well. So it's a real conversation that I think can support the recommendations. I would highlight, though, go a little bit beyond your question, is staff have worked very closely together. And I do think that understanding kind of where there's conceptual recommendations, I think, and committing to fleshing those out longer term for implementation, I think will be really important, and how that can be effective in supporting this very important service in the valley. So we'll make the long answer, but we'll make sure we find out when they need to know, and then the type of direction that they need back specifically, and make sure that we support those timelines.
Okay, thanks very much. Sounds wise.
Excellent. And that's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, I wasn't sure if you saw my right. Yeah, just in discussing this and seeing, that there's some real impacts, of course, within the city, but also it's a regional service and it affects, services for pedestrians and active travel. It had me thinking about the MOU that came to council, I think late last spring, around active travel through CVRD, and it was meant to be a format for the municipalities in the region for coordinating on these things. And I'm just wondering if this would tie into that at all, and if that's come up and if that's coming back to council. It just seemed like an opportune time to maybe bring that into the discussion.
Through the mayor to Councillor McCollum, the transportation MOU was broad in coordinating of activities. So I would think that transit service improvements as well as transit infrastructure improvements could be part of that for sure. And we do need to come back to council if it was direction on that. There are a number of initiatives underway currently that do align our transportation objectives, including our transportation master plan, the active transportation plans that were done by the respective municipalities. It's really understanding what would the purpose of that MOU be and what would result in on the ground, because we do have, through regional growth strategy function, the technical advisory committee and the steering committee under that function are already charged with doing some of those activities. But definitely we need to respond back to that direction.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I know it's off topic, but I think that MOU conceptualized an agenda item at the RGS sort of staff meetings for that coordination. So I also am looking forward to hearing back about how we might participate in this regional coordination on active transportation.
Excellent. And no further questions or comments. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Still weird voting with their hands, but one thing left.
Move the chairman.
Oh, Councillor Hilling.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to acknowledge that we won't be meeting again until after July 1st. And as everyone knows, Canada Day activities were going to be significantly curtailed this year in any case due to the pandemic. But in fact, it's another example of our staff having done some pivoting to make sure that Canada Day is in fact acknowledged, but in a way that's respectful of our First Nations residents and all the people who are in fact in mourning over the incidents that have happened. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that and appreciate both our staff and all of our citizens for whom I think that there's some confusion and some challenge around how we deal with an event like this, given the context that we're experiencing this year. So thanks for allowing me to comment on that.
Thanks so much, Councillor Hillian. I do appreciate that. And yeah, all the volunteers, all the people that have traditionally been part of it and those that are part of it this year. But the theme of Canada Day reflections to really pause and reflect on how we can best institute reconciliation in our own lives and across the nation, I think is certainly appropriate. So thanks for that. And with that, anybody opposed to adjournment?